So here we're back in Visual Studio, and we're looking at the code for a priority queue. Now, to keep our focus on what makes a priority queue different than a normal queue, I've decided to implement this using a linked list. This will allow us to not have to worry about the array growth items that make the array-backed queue so much more complex than a list-backed queue. So let's start with the inQueue method. Now recall with a normal queue, inQueue is a single line long. It's simply an add last. But now it's a little bit longer. So let's figure out why. Well, we start with an empty list, and if the list is empty, we just add the item to the end of it. But if the list isn't empty, we need to find the proper point at which to insert the data. So what we do is we start at the front of the list. Now the front of the list is the highest priority item. So we say, while we're not null, which we won't be the first time through because we do have an item in the list, check, is the current value greater than the item we're adding? And if it is, then we need to go to the next item in the list because the highest priority item remains in the front. So we'll continue to loop around until we find an item in the list where the item we're adding is a higher priority. And when that happens, we'll break out. Once we've broken out of the while, we check, are we null? And if we're null, that means we made it all the way to the end of the list without finding an appropriate point to add, so we just add ourselves to the end. But if we're not null, that means that we want to add ourselves into the middle of the list. Now our linked list class in .NET provides an add before method, and that allows us to add our item before the current item. And in this case, the current item is the item we found whose value was less than or equal to our item. So inQueue just walks the list of items, finds the appropriate place to insert our item, and performs the insert. dqueue is exactly the same as it was in the linked list example. In fact, the rest of the class is exactly the same as the linked list example. It's only inQueue that needed a change for the priority queue to work.